beneath a moon choked by storm clouds, where iron gates groan and ancient tombstones lean like rotted teeth. There are places no living soul should wander after dark. Tonight, we walk there, through crumbling mausoleums, amongst the weed-choked graves. For in El Salvador, there are whispers older than prayer, warnings carried through generations not to speak too loudly of the dead who refuse to rest. Every Salvadoran knows the story. The true danger is that some dismiss them as mere superstition, until the darkness answers with a sound too dreadful to mistake. A slow, unnatural squeak, a noise that should not exist among the graves. And when it comes, it's already too late. Before we begin, I want to extend my deepest gratitude to some truly remarkable supporters. Carol, Laura, Terry, Karen, and Will, ×2. I remembered. Your generosity, steadfast encouragement, and kindness continue to make these adventures possible, and I'm sincerely thankful for each of you. Last week's top comment came from Bree, who has been watching my content for years, and it truly meant the world to me. More than anything, I hope this series inspires others to take a chance on El Salvador, because those who do will discover a country of extraordinary beauty, filled with some of the kindest people you could ever hope to meet. To everyone who continues to share your thoughts, thank you. I read every comment, and your words mean more than you know. Please keep them coming. I've started a channel membership. If you're interested, click subscribe and then join for more details. As always, thank you to Timeless Stories of El Salvador for the inspiration.
Nonato Nombría was a son of silence, raised not by parents, but by the streets of Sevilla, Spain, and the shadowed dawn of the 17th century. His name, meaning nameless, was the mark of mistakes never meant to live. He bore it like an unchosen scar.
His mother died giving him breath. No father ever sent coin or word. Swaddled in rags and doubt, he grew among the abandoned. Even there, Nonato was strange. Quiet, watchful, vanishing for hours. He unnerved the other children in the church orphanage for what he did in the cellar, pinning stray animals, cutting them open, whispering as they died. In time, a priest discovered his secrets and cast him out. Left to his own devices and searching for food, he drifted into the city square where a public execution was underway. Several hooded men trembled in chains. The crowd jeered. Nonato only watched, not the spectacle, but their eyes. Most turned away at the instant of death. Nonato leaned in, fixated on the breath's last flutter, the light's vanishing spark. When the square emptied, it was time to collect the dead. Nonato offered to assist in exchange for food. He helped load the corpses onto a wooden cart. Its wheels shrieked as it bore the dead away, an omen to all but him. From that night, the boy never missed an execution. Years passed. Where others gathered for justice or vengeance, Nonato came for something far more inscrutable, the dark and beckoning mystery of death.
Nonato lived on the streets and survived on scraps. Transporting the dead was thankless work, and its wage was misery. Yet, worst of all, was the wagon's cry, a thin, rusted wail that split the stillness like a blade. To Nonato, it was the vilest sound in all creation.
Salvation came in the form of a weathered apothecary, half-blind, desperate for help, who took Nonato in. He vowed his days with the squealing wagon were over. Years dissolved into the twilight of mortar and pestle. Nonato learned tinctures, poultices, and filters. But knowledge bred hunger, and healing was not enough. Soon, he began to alter doses, combine forbidden compounds. When the apothecary discovered this quiet defiance, he too cast Nonato out, muttering of something cold within him. Nonato pressed on. He was built to weather storms. A physician granted him an apprenticeship. For years, he watched surgeries with rapture. Healing back of skin, the sound of bone yielding. He longed to wield the scalpel, to measure how far life could stretch before it broke.
When denied practice on the living, he turned to what he knew best, the dead. Under moonlight, he crept into the cathedral cemetery.
With tools, oil, and thread, he unearthed the newly buried, pried open coffins, and studied their silent anatomy. He stitched corpses back together with reverent care. Gold teeth, rings, pendants, whatever the earth surrendered, he pawned. The dead had no need for trinkets. But desecration leaves traces. One night, as Nonato's blade hovered over a fresh chest, shadows moved. Lanterns flared. Authorities closed in, and at their center stood the priest who once expelled him from the orphanage. His voice thundered through the tombstones. Nonato Nombría, profaner of the sacred dead, may heaven's wrath fall upon you. You shall find no peace in life nor in death. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, I cast you from the mercy of the Church. Nonato unraveled fast. The curse struck him like the final judgment. And then came the sound. That cursed squeal. The wagon's wail, swelling from the depths of his mind into a maddening dirge only he could hear. He had sworn never again to hear it, never to feel its wheels beneath him. Nonato was consumed with fury and desperation. He was trapped with no escape, except one. Nonato rushed the priest and drove his blade into him. He knew where it would do the most damage. Blood fountained across the graves. Breaking free of the authorities encircling him, eyes blazing, Nonato fled into the night as shouts pursued him.
Like countless others fleeing their past for a better future, Nonato bartered every coin for passage across the Atlantic to a world where names could be forgotten.
Nonato arrived at Puerto Carreta with the hope of a new life on the horizon. The voyage was long and merciless. Tempests howled, threatening to sink the vessel. Provisions rotted, and illness crept like mold through the crowded decks. Nonato was strangely immune. When disease struck, he offered aid, but not out of mercy. He experimented openly, bleeding some, dosing others with untested concoctions, recording symptoms with cold precision. The wealthier the victim, the greater his care, because a noble soul carried a heavier purse. If they recovered, Nonato claimed credit and demanded payment. If they worsened, he adjusted his notes. If they died, he whispered it was God's will.
At last, the ship docked in Puerto Cortes, modern-day Honduras, where the jungle met the sea, and the air smelled of sweat, smoke, and salt. It was raw land, vivid and untamed.
But Nonato was no stranger to survival. For months, he lingered, peddling his skills to soldiers and merchants at the empire's fringe. His knowledge was uncanny, his past buried. Until the whisper came. Someone had spoken his name. A man from Sevilla remembered the graveyard, the blood, the desecrated dead. The priest he stabbed had died. The church had not forgotten. Warrants stirred. Soldiers muttered. Then it came, the sound only he could hear. The phantom wagon's wail, shrieking through his skull like rusted iron on stone, swelling to a deafening dirge.
And so Nonato fled again. Before him lay a continent, vast and unbroken, a wilderness where he might find refuge, or become someone else entirely.
One day, Nonato crossed into the verdant lands of what is now El Salvador, wandering until he stumbled upon a secluded village veiled in mist. There, Yoltik Tekel, the chief and revered shaman, lay dying of a fever no remedy could break. His wife and son kept vigil. Nonato, always more curious than merciful, offered aid. With cold precision, he mixed a tincture whose secrets even he barely grasped. By dawn, the fever broke. The village celebrated as he watched, detached. The shaman, awed by the recovery, sang Nonato's praises and welcomed him as one of their own. Here, in this isolated refuge, no one knew his history. No one spoke of the manhunt. No one saw a murderer. Surrounded by a peaceful people who practiced a wholly different kind of medicine, rooted in spirit, earth, and intuition, Nonato absorbed their knowledge like a sponge in the spring rain. They knew things, secret things, about the body and the forest that no apothecary or physician had ever taught. He studied obsidian tools, incense resins, roots with names as old as language. Yet, in his heart, contempt festered. Their ways were primitive, their faith naive. He had absorbed all the knowledge he would hear and shared none of his own in return. He dreamed of salons and silver spoons, of marble halls and velvet drapes, of healing people who mattered. But brilliance alone would not open doors, not for a nameless orphan, hunted for sacrilege and murder.
And then he heard it. Clip-clop, clip-clop. The faint stench of sulfur filled the air.
From the veil of fog between the trees, a steed emerged, black as pitch, its hooves striking the earth with an unnatural hiss. Each step leaving scorched patches of soil where fire seemed to smolder and die. Its breath rose in twisting tendrils of smoke, and from its face burned eyes of hellish red. Upon its back sat a man draped entirely in black, every fold of his cloak merging with the shadows. His silver gauntlet glinted like cold moonlight as he held the reins loosely, utterly at ease atop the beast. His face was impossibly striking, youthful and flawless. When his eyes, dark and glimmering like embers in ash, found Nonato, it was as though the forest itself recoiled. He reined his steed to a halt not 10 paces away. The air seemed to hold its breath, waiting, as the two men were practically identical. The stranger in black casually dismounted and smiled as if he was greeting an old friend. "Good day, Alonso." Nonato stiffened against the tree. "You have the wrong man. That is not my name." "But it could be," the man replied, his voice smooth as oiled velvet. "I don't know what you're talking about," Nonato replied. "My name is Nonato. Not that it's any of your concern." "Nonato Nombría," the stranger mused. "Yes, the nuns gave you that name. Born of a dying mother, a father who never looked back. You raised yourself in the gutters of Sevilla, learned to survive in the filth and flame. You taught yourself what others paid fortunes to know. That's admirable. But survival has a price. You killed to live. And now you are here, on the edge of the world, needing something more than your past can give. Let me offer it." Nonato said nothing, but his eyes shimmered with a dangerous gleam. The man in black saw it. He knew that gleam well. It was the shine of ambition, the spark of a soul ready to bargain. Once, in a drunken portside tavern in Puerto Cortes, Nonato had heard a sailor speak, half slurred and stinking of rum, of a man in black, a steed with blood eyes, and a gift few survived. He granted your wildest dreams, but always came for your soul. The indigenous said he was a demon. The Christians called him Satan.
But most knew him by one title alone, the Black Knight. And if one could outwit him, according to the sailor, then he could not take that person's soul.
Nonato stood and finally asked, "Speak truth. Are you the soul sucker?" The Black Knight tilted his head. "I am the one who gives what cannot be earned. The name, the life, the respect, all yours. And when your days have run their course, when your hair is gray and your bones ache, I come to collect the soul I am owed. Some consider it a fair trade." Nonato stared at him as he stepped away from the tree and into deep thought. He had always believed himself to be the cleverest man in any room. Clever enough to escape, to survive, and to learn. Perhaps clever enough to win. He imagined himself among the salons, speaking with intellects, admired for his cures, his theories, his charm. If anyone could outwit the Black Knight, it was him. And he had time. Years, perhaps even decades, to figure out how. "I accept," Nonato said, with calculation. The Black Knight's smile widened. He raised a gauntleted hand to the sky. Day turned to night. He pointed to the horizon. "Your new life awaits in San Salvador. Make the most of it." And with that, he returned to his steed. In a thunderous gust of smoke and fire, horse and rider vanished, leaving behind scorched earth and a man reborn.
And without a word of farewell, Nonato abandoned the village that had sheltered him and fled into the darkness. The mist curled around his feet like reluctant ghosts.
As a soft sun rose, Nonato reached the outskirts of San Salvador. A friendly rider approached, leading a second horse. Doctor, I brought your horse." The rider dismounted. "Was your visit successful?" Nonato hesitated. "Excuse me." "Your journey," the man said, puzzled. "Did it go well?" Then, nerves became confidence. Nonato remembered the Black Knight's words, the name he had given him. Alonso. This was his new life. "Yes," Nonato replied, voice steady. "It was successful." "Excellent, Doctor. Shall I ride with you to the villa? Or would you prefer I ride ahead and announce your return?" A flicker of panic returned to Nonato's mind. Villa? He hadn't the faintest idea where it was. But he masked his surprise with a nod. "Let us ride together." "Certainly, Doctor," said the man, mounting his horse. Off they went. The man led as they conversed. Nonato learned his companion's name was David, and he had been in service to him for years. David led him to an elegant estate nestled in the hills. The villa rose proudly from the earth, its columns whitewashed, its windows tall and glinting with the sunlight. As they approached, the staff emerged in unison to greet him, bowing, smiling, and awaiting his word. That evening, they prepared his favorite meal, though he had never once spoken the words. Every detail was as he dreamed. He wandered the marble-floored halls of his splendid home, touching its velvet drapes and carved wooden panels, until he found himself in a study. His study.
On his desk sat a set of stationery and gilded script bearing his new name, Dr. Alonso de Ribera y Guzman. Finally, at long last, a name worthy of his skill.
At dawn, David showed a wealthy gentleman in for treatment. He was a stranger to Nonato. Yet, with practiced confidence, he diagnosed and cured him. Payment came heavy with silver. In the coming days, more patients followed. Broken bodies, leaving whole, singing his praises. Soon, he was summoned to the parlors and private chambers of the elite, performing surgeries others deemed impossible. His fame soared. Yet, in the shadows of this triumph, his old hunger stirred. To the poor in the slums, he offered mercy, testing tinctures and poisons on their bodies, cloaking cruelty in the language of God's will. If they lived, it was his miracle. If they died, it was divine judgment. Years gilded themselves in wealth and reverence. His name passed in whispers of awe. His hands, honed by graveyard sacrilege, wrought marvels others dared not attempt.
A decade passed. The more lives that he mended, the more he was praised. The name Dr. Alonso de Rivera y Guzman was spoken with reverence. And slowly, silently, the name Nonato Nombría ceased to exist.
One morning, just after sunrise, Alonso sat in his study. David burst in, breathless with urgency. "Doctor," he said, "there's a man at the gate." Alonso, seated at his desk, didn't look up. "Then send him in. We don't leave clients standing in the sun." David hesitated. "He's not a client, Doctor. He says his name is Yotik Teko, and he's asking for someone named Nonato." The name struck like a bell in a long abandoned chapel. Nonato froze. His hand, poised with pen mid-air, trembled. He hadn't heard either of those names, Yotik Teko or Nonato, in years. The wagon had returned, and with it, the shrill lament of its wheels. That infernal squeal, sharp as a blade, rose again to torment him. Nonato clamped his hands over his ears, desperate to silence the maddening, deafening cry that no one else could hear. Concerned, David stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Are you all right, Doctor? Shall I alert the authorities? He might be unstable. The staff are growing uneasy." Nonato's voice, when it came, was brittle. No authorities. Just send him away." "I tried, Doctor, but he refuses to leave. He's been standing at the gate since dawn. The house staff are whispering." Nonato clenched his jaw in anger. "I'll speak with him outside," Nonato said, regaining his composure. David bowed and retreated. Nonato rose, fixing his expression.
Nonato knew all too well how whispers became rumors and rumors became threats. He couldn't have anyone tying him to the name Nonato, or worse, to an indignant man from a forgotten village. His life, his identity, his prestige, everything could be gone in an instant. So he would have to deal with this himself.
Nonato stepped out into the morning light. The moment Yotik Teko saw him, his face lit up with hope. "Nonato!" he cried out, his voice ringing with emotion. "Quiet!" Nonato hissed. "People are still sleeping." Yotik Teko embraced Nonato as an old friend. Nonato shrugged him off. "What are you doing here?" Nonato inquired. Yotik Tekel's expression turned desperate. My son, he's sick. The same sickness I once had. You cured me. I beg you, my friend, heal him. The plea struck like a curse. Yoltik would not leave. He'd wait, beg and repeat that forbidden name until someone listened or the staff started asking questions. Nonato's mind sharpened. He softened his tone, draping it in false compassion. I'm so sorry. Your son is a brave boy. Of course I'll come. We must leave immediately. There's no time to waste. We'll take 2 of my horses to quicken the journey. But please, wait here and speak to no one. I need to prepare a few things. Yoltik Tekel nodded, grateful and trusting. He did as he was told. Inside, Nonato carefully selected a range of medicines and tools, everything he would need to create the appearance of care. Then, he summoned David and instructed him to pack for several days' ride. No questions were asked. The horses were prepared, the saddlebags stocked. By mid-morning, Nonato and Yoltik Tekel were galloping away from the villa, one carrying hope, the other carrying secrets.
Nonato was welcomed with open arms into the village that he had once called home. The villagers, who had loved him when he had nothing, no name, no home, not a penny, greeted him like a long-lost brother.
In the modest home of Yoltik Tekel, the boy, his son, lay fevered and slick with sweat, just as Yoltik himself had been all those years ago. His breath came in shallow gasps, his lips parched, his skin hot to the touch. Nonato got to work. With practiced ease, he poured tinctures and powders into small clay vessels, stirring until the mixture glowed with a strange iridescence. Once it was done, he gently administered the brew. Then came the waiting. Yoltik's wife prepared food while the 2 men sat in silence, broken only by the distant cries of birds. At last, Yoltik broke the silence. Why is everyone calling you Alonso de Ribera y Guzman? Nonato did not flinch. I'm a doctor now, he lied smoothly. It's customary. Every physician takes a new name. Yoltik Tekel nodded. I see. You have a fine home. Servants. Respect. You are doing well. His voice softened. I am happy for you, my friend. Nonato asked, How did you find me? I searched, Yoltik replied simply as Nonato listened intently. Every village, every town, I asked for Nonato. When no one knew the name, I described your face, your way of speaking. And finally, I was told of a doctor whose remedies could cure anything. His appearance matched you, so I came.
A cold dread coiled in Nonato's chest. The damage had been done. The cursed name had been whispered across the land, and now tethered to the face of a man who bore another.
Over and over again in his head, he heard, Nonato, Nonato. The syllables seemed to roll like wheels in his mind, grinding against bone. Then came the sound. Thin at first, then swelling. A shrill lament of rusted iron, the wagon's infernal squeal cleaving through his thoughts like a blade. It was everywhere, shrieking, maddening, deafening. He rubbed his temples, attempting to soothe out the sound, but still, it keened within him. a dirge only he could hear. He could not allow the disease to spread further. Dr. Alonso de Ribera y Guzman could not breathe, could not endure. Not in the same world where Nonato Nombría lived and lingered. As the men sat together, Yoltik's wife suddenly appeared. Her face beamed with relief. "He's stopped sweating," she said. "He's awake. He's speaking again." Yoltik Tekel turned to Nonato, eyes shining with gratitude. "You've saved him," he said. "You've saved our boy."
The village celebrated. They chanted Nonato's name as they did when he had cured Yoltik. Meanwhile, Nonato's mind churned.
Yoltik's wife prepared enough food for everyone. The village sat to eat. The air filled with joy and laughter. After some time, Nonato set down his spoon. "I've been thinking," he said to Yoltik. "I believe the entire village is at risk. What afflicted your son may spread quickly. It's even possible for you to fall ill again, and it would be worse the second time. I must prepare something for everyone. A preventative elixir. Once taken, no one will suffer again." Yoltik Tekel nodded solemnly. "As protector of this village, I thank you for your generosity. I always tell our people, Nonato can heal anyone of anything." For hours, Nonato worked with careful precision, mixing a batch large enough for the entire village. As twilight descended, Yoltik organized the distribution. His wife drank first, followed by their son, then the elders and families. Yoltik waited until everyone else had been served, and then, at last, he drank.
The village grew quiet. People began to yawn, and one by one, they drifted to sleep.
Yoltik and Nonato sat together, watching, as the village's silence became deafening. Yoltik yawned as well, rubbing his eyes. Something felt wrong. He turned to Nonato. "Is this supposed to happen?" "Yes," Nonato said, calmly. Yoltik tried to rouse his wife. She did not move. As he lifted her, a trickle of blood ran from her nose. He stood, heart pounding, and turned in horror. All around him, villagers lay still, red seeping from their eyes, mouths, and nostrils. He touched his own face. His fingers came away red. Yoltik's eyes locked with Nonato's, who now stood motionless, expressionless. In that final moment, understanding dawned.
Yoltik Tekel raised his voice one last time, not in desperation, but in defiance. His voice cracked the silence like thunder.
"You, who wore the mask of a healer but came with the venom of snakes. You, who watched as the children drank death, who offered false medicine so my people would fall. By the bones of my ancestors and the names buried in the stones, I curse you. May the earth refuse your body. You will not die, because death is too good for you. You will walk between the worlds seeing and hearing what you fear most. I give the name Nonato to the night." And with those words, Yoltik Tekel slumped beside his wife and son, lifeless.
Nonato watched the breath leave him. The only man who had ever called him a friend and meant it, now crumbled amongst the corpses of his people.
Nonato felt no sorrow, no fear, only a cold, quiet ease, a disconcerting comfort in the stillness of the death and silence that surrounded him. He spent hours admiring his work. When he was ready, Nonato entered the hut prepared for him by one of the villagers he murdered. He lay down on a woven mat and closed his eyes. He slept soundly, dreamlessly, untouched by guilt, unbothered by curse, as if the blood he spilled were no more than ink, and the lives he ended no more than names on forgotten pages. At dawn, Nonato rose to a silence thicker than ash. The village, once filled with warmth and welcome, was now a graveyard. He stood among the bodies of those who had shown him nothing but kindness. Without hesitation, he set fire to it all. Every home, every hut, every memory. He watched the flames consume it, as if by burning it down, he might erase the name Nonato once and for all.
With zero emotion, he mounted his horse and led the second. Then he rode toward San Salvador.
Many years passed. Dr. Alonso de Ribera y Guzman prospered. He remained ensconced in his grand villa, a palace of stone and shadows, served by many and pitied by none. He performed surgeries to audiences of other doctors and students. He treated only the wealthy, and in doing so, multiplied his fortune. He continued experimenting on the poor beyond his gates, who he claimed survived or died by God's will. He aged, yet his mind remained sharp and cold.
One night, as he sat alone by his desk, suddenly he heard it. Familiar rhythm. Clip-clop, clip-clop. And then he smelt sulfur drift from beneath his door.
The hour was late. His servants slept. He rose from his desk without fear and stepped into the courtyard. There stood the Black Knight, clad in iron blacker than pitch, his steed's eyes glowing like coals smoldering in the depths of hell. The two men were once nearly identical. All these decades later, and the appearance of neither rider nor horse had changed. The Black Knight spoke, his voice hollow as a tomb. "Did you enjoy your life, Alonso?" The old man smiled. "Every moment," he said. "I would do nothing different. Now, finish it." The Black Knight tilted his head. "So be it." He reached forward with his gauntleted hand to seize the soul he was owed. But, as his fingers closed around the physician's chest, he paused. There was nothing to take. His soul was as non-existent as his name. Cursed by both priest and shaman, twisted by his own deeds, it had withered into nothing. The old man's smile grew, for he knew he had outsmarted the Black Knight. Still, the Black Knight would not be denied. He always collected.
To this day, elders warn the young, never linger in a cemetery after dark. Nothing worthwhile walks by the tombstones at nightfall, and no soul with pure intent has any reason to be there. First, you'll hear it. the sound of a rusted wheel. Creak, creak, creaking in the silence. If you hear it, run. Then you'll smell the sulfur. Once you smell it, it's too late to run. Hide.
This is the moment the Black Knight appears to bargain, when the air itself seems to hold its breath. His arrival is felt before it's seen, and when he steps from the mist, cloaked in shadow and promise, you'll understand the truth whispered across centuries. The Black Knight always comes to make deals with the desperate in the dark.
If you do not make the deal, then what you see next will cause your blood to run cold.
From the gray mist emerge skeletal oxen with eyes like embers, joints creaking, bones clicking like splintered timber in a storm. The godless beasts drag a rotting wooden cart, its wheels groaning with each shuddering turn. At the reins sits a figure that was once a man. What remains of its flesh clings like parchment to bone, thin and brittle as dried skin stretched over a corpse. Shrouded in a black cloak and hood, it is neither living nor dead, condemned to wander the cemeteries it once defiled, listening to the sound it despises. When the cart screeches to a halt, the Revenant picks up a rusted scythe with one hand, its blade stained with centuries of blood. Upon the wagon are the corpses of those who did not run fast enough, hide well enough, or make a deal with the Black Knight. Their heads were removed with surgical precision and replaced by sodden clumps of grass stuffed crudely into their necks, sculpted into faces twisted with pain and silence. With the other hand, the Revenant holds a whip made of sinew and chain. When the whip cracks, the dead are horribly reanimated, draped in black cassocks. They walk in silence beside the cart, marching to a rhythm no living heart could bear.
If you deny the Black Knight and you see the creature, then it may be too late. For the love of all things holy, do not freeze. Speak the name it despises. It's your only chance.
You may awaken in your bed, drenched in sweat, heart hammering against your ribs, your breath shallow and ragged in the dark. You tell yourself it was only a nightmare, a trick of exhaustion, of imagination. But the silence presses too close, and the air feels wrong. And deep inside, you already know the truth. It wasn't a nightmare, and you're going to need years of therapy.
The truth is, we all have a cart that squeaks, and those who live a double life hate the sound more than anyone else because it reminds them of who they truly are. No one running from their past wants to be reminded of their origins, and when they are, when the squeak reaches their ears, they do not just keep walking. They freeze, as if the weight has turned their blood to stone. So, what's your squeaky cart? Comment below if you're feeling brave. And since you've made it this far in the video, please click the like button. It helps more than you know.
By day, Salvadoran cemeteries are places of remarkable beauty, vibrant with color, memory, and reverence. Sunlight spills across painted tombs and towering mausoleums, where flowers bloom, candles flicker, and generations are honored in peace. Families gather, Prayers are whispered. Life is remembered with love. But when the sun vanishes and shadows stretch between the graves, that beauty becomes something far more unsettling. The colors fade. The silence deepens. And those same sacred paths can transform into places where no soul should wander lightly. For after dark, those resting grounds belong to something older than grief, something patient, listening, waiting for you to misstep. So, admire the beauty beneath the safety of daylight. Walk their sacred paths while the living still hold dominion. But if night finds you lingering too long, if you stand on the wrong side of the gates, if the fog begins to move with purpose, and living death begins to squeal, remember, speak the name, the one it tried to bury, the one it tried to burn, the one the afterlife could not claim. Because in the deepest darkness, that name may be the only light left to save you. Stay curious, be inspired, find freedom, wander elsewhere. Maybe I'll see you in the next one. Nonato Nombría.